It is May 15th, a Wednesday. It is 9 a.m. and this is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission business agenda. We will start with the roll call.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Messner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Ray. Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 of 7 commissioners present. I'm sorry.
Yep. Welcome to all 6 of you. Welcome, Hearings Manager Thomas. Great to have everybody with us in our routine virtual format. We already have 64 folks listening in as well. We welcome all of them to the commission meeting this morning. We will start with commissioner comments. That's the time when commissioners can educate themselves and each other about things they are doing. If there are no comments, that doesn't mean we're not doing anything. We're all pretty darn busy. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to give a bit of a geothermal update. As the commission and those who are listening in may recall, subsequent to Governor Polis's Heat Beneath Our Feet initiative when he was chair of the Western Governors Association, and then pursuant to legislation last year in 2023, ECMC was given stewardship over deep geothermal operations in Colorado. Shallow geothermal operations remain in the purview of DWR. And for those listening in, those are the geothermal operations that you're probably most familiar with, heat pumps and those types of things. Deep geothermal is deep geothermal wells that are often intended to produce electricity. And so we set about immediately after that on a number of fronts. One of those was to begin crafting deep geothermal rules. And after a number of outreach meetings, we presented an initial draft in front of the commission last fall. And we got significant feedback from the commission in that meeting. And we also received significant feedback from many interested stakeholders. From that point forth, we set forth to significantly modify that draft based on the input that we'd received in preparation for geothermal rulemaking. And then as late winter and spring moved on, and as ECMC has finite resources, out of necessity, we prioritized cumulative impacts efforts, as well as completing the legislative session and a number of other initiatives. Nonetheless, in the background, we continued to diligently work on refining the draft rules and preparing them for rulemaking. And I'm pleased to let people know that ECMC is noticing the latest draft of geothermal rules today and initiating a rulemaking around them. And you'll be able to find more information on the ECMC website. I wanted to recognize quickly Mike Rigby and John Morgan from ECMC, who've worked very, very diligently through the winter on all things geothermal, as well as Ben Boudreau from the Attorney General's office, who's been imperative to the process. We expect this will be a great step forward for Colorado, particularly as we continue to pursue efforts to reduce the carbon footprint of energy production. And we look forward to hearing from everyone and invite your engagement in this rulemaking process as we pave the road together to for this renewable geothermal energy opportunity. I also would be remiss if I didn't recognize my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Ray, who has worked very diligently on this as well. That's it for me. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks for the update on that important topic and for leading the efforts there, Commissioner Ackerman. Other commissioners with comments? All right, seeing none, we move to consent agenda. Does anyone have questions on consent? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Messner, second from Commissioner Cross to approve consent. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next matter on the agenda is an update from me on, it says cumulative impacts rulemaking update, but it's going to be more of a legislative update. And in order to do that, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. All right, can everybody see that screen? Someone give me a verbal.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Now, Angelica, tell me how to move from one screen to the next.
Go ahead and just click.
Oh, there we go. Just click on it. Okay. Rulemaking update. So, Commissioner Ackerman accomplished the first, the geothermal rulemaking. We also have a cumulative impacts rulemaking scheduled for this season, as well as a carbon capture and sequestration rulemaking, and then a produced water rulemaking. The way we're going to accommodate these things is we're going to kind of double down on each and try to do a little bit of both in terms of both. So the geothermal rulemaking will be noticed today with proposed rules. That rulemaking will be accomplished in the month of July. By early to mid-June, we will publish notice of the cumulative impacts rulemaking. I'll get into that in a bit more detail here in a second. And that rulemaking will be briefed in late July and August and will be accomplished in early September. We need to do our CCS rulemaking. We received the additional authority over the course of this last legislative session. That will be a October-ish sort of rulemaking. And then Commissioner Messner, who's running the Produced Water Consortium, will lead us in a produced water rulemaking that will be November, December-ish. So those are the rulemakings that are ahead of us. Lots of good work ahead to be done. HB 1346 update. This is an update in which I was really, I did a poor job. I just used acronyms as opposed to actual words. But from HB 1346, we received additional authority around carbon capture and sequestration. We defined pore space as being in the surface estate owner. The legislature created a unitization provision within our authority, and we clarified some of the ancillary facilities around carbon capture and storage as being within the jurisdiction of ECMC. We also received finite authority to be able to utilize administrative law judges, which is helpful to the commission as we advance into these new areas. The statute of limitations, that's SOL, was also expanded from 1 year to 3 years. And then we received a definition of cumulative impacts that is here. So we were working on a cumulative impacts rulemaking to evaluate and address cumulative impacts as a result of operations that ECMC regulates over the course of the last year. We've been doing this over the course of the last 4 years. Each year we've advanced the ball on cumulative impacts. We received a definition of cumulative impacts last legislative session, so in 2023, and we were working on that up through April of this year. However, the legislature decided that they wanted to enhance or change the definition of cumulative impacts that we would be rulemaking around, so we stopped that rulemaking, and now we were given this definition here that speaks to cumulative impacts resulting from operations regulated by the commission pursuant to this Article 60. So this definition is the new definition that we will work around as we create a rulemaking that evaluates and addresses cumulative impacts. And again, that rulemaking will culminate in early September. There are some other ancillary definitions around cumulative impacts. There's the definition of impact area. That's the area, the geographic area or areas in which operations regulated by the commission have the potential to contribute to cumulative impacts. Impacts to climate was also specifically defined. In particular, it speaks to that those greenhouse gas impacts that are controlled or owned by the energy and carbon management operator. We also have a definition of reasonably foreseeable future development that we need to take into account when we're thinking about the impact area. As I mentioned, the statute establishes the rules need to be done by September 30th. They need to address all impacts. Folks that are familiar with the cumulative impacts rulemaking that we stalled out, that was addressing for a large part impacts around air. The impacts that we now need to be thinking about are all of the impacts set forth in the definition on the previous slide. These slides will be up on our website so folks can go back and look at it. And then as a caveat, cumulative impacts rules do not address geothermal or science wells. We also were provided by Senate Bill 229, this new rulemaking that also needs to be accomplished by September 30th of 2024. This is around enhanced systems and practices to require enhanced techniques to avoid, minimize, and mitigate emission of ozone precursors from operations in the non-attainment area. I would note that this is from operations in the non-attainment area. The initial rulemaking by statute established that we need to be taking a look at the CDPHE consult approach and take a look at the best management practices that are contained therein and make some determinations of which of those need to be turned into rules at our agency. Other updates from Senate Bill 229, we are allowed to and required to hire at least 2 community liaisons for DI communities to work to improve relationships between DICs and the commission. They liaisons will become a resource for information between the ECMC and DICs. They will help us engage in outreach to DI communities, and they will help organize and attend meetings in DIC. We're looking for input on how to best implement the 2 community liaisons. Folks can get in touch with Deputy Director Larson or Director Murphy on that front. The second piece on DICs and ECMC is that we now, by statute, will avoid, minimize, and mitigate adverse impacts specifically in DI communities. Previously, under SB 19181, we were provided the mission change to avoid, minimize, and mitigate adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources. We now add DI communities to that mandate, which is a good thing, and we look forward to implementing that statutory mandate into our rules. And then the other big component of SB 229 was the commitment on the ECMC enterprise. So our enterprise is an orphan well fund. It allows us to plug and abandon orphan wells. It is entirely funded by fees on the oil and gas industry. Each well is responsible for providing a fee to the orphan well fund on a yearly basis, and that equates to approximately $10 million a year into the orphan well fund. Our orphan well manager, Dave Andrews, and his team do an excellent job of using those funds to plug and abandon orphan wells. The statute provided additional authority to the enterprise to allow those fees to be, number one, upped to the tune of $5 million. That's another $120 per well. And then this additional money can be used to plug marginally producing wells in and near DICs and people. I would note to the commission and to everybody listening in that this is a voluntary situation. We still do not have the authority to require marginal wells to be plugged and abandoned. But for those operators that have marginal wells, this is an opportunity to make sure that those wells get plugged and abandoned using this money from industry. So this is an exciting new development for us, and we look forward to implementing this in a manner that is going to make sure that it works for our state and for those marginally producing wells in and near people and DICs. Again, as I mentioned earlier, enhanced technique rulemaking is something that we're going to do at the same time that we do cumulative impacts. Need to be finished by September 30th. Other items from SB 229 are enforcement provisions. The first requires us to ensure that operators have a license to conduct operations. Previously, our enforcement had been tied directly to specific oil and gas development plans or actual permitted operations. This requires a licensure to conduct operations, and if you have a license to conduct operations, and if you're doing a poor job of conducting operations, by statute, we can now, through an enforcement provision, revoke said license to an operator within the state. That's a pretty significant enforcement technique. It is done in other areas, and I think it's something that will assist us in ensuring compliance with our rules and regulations. Other enforcement, one is to increase the burden for staying enforcement orders. Operators currently have to show irreparable harm to stay an enforcement order during the pendency of a litigation event. The new standard will require a showing of likelihood of success on the merits by the company challenging the stay order, and that the balance of equities favors a stay when considering impacts on public health and the environment. Again, an expansion of our enforcement authority during the pendency of an enforcement matter. And it allows us to expand the use of cease and desist orders, and it increases grounds for revoking permits and licenses to conduct oil and gas operations. So 3 or 4 healthy enforcement measures for ECMC as we are doing our work around the state. And with that, I will stop my share. And now I can see everybody. And commissioners, did anybody have any questions with regard to any of that? Kind of a quick overview, but just wanted to get folks in touch with the new elements of the legislation that came to us. All right. Must have done a good job. I don't see any questions. Next on our agenda is docket 2111-00228. It is an oil and gas development plan for Bonanza Creek. Let's take 5 minutes and get the folks up and running, and let's return at 9:22, and we will hear the next matter on our agenda. All right, we are back. Docket 2111-00228, an oil and gas development plan, Bonanza Creek. And I believe we are looking for the attorney, Ms. Wazelinski, perhaps, or Ms. Jost. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Thank you. Sorry, my little trouble with my camera. I believe Weld County is going to speak before we jump into the presentation.
That's right. And I believe it is going to be, I'm looking here, Ms. Teeters. Good morning.
Good morning. All right, well, good morning, commissioners and all those on the line. Thank you for the opportunity to speak for just a few minutes about the Weld County 1041 WOGA process and some of the important factors into Weld's review of the Bonanza Creek Energy Operating Company, LLC, for their Pronghorn OGDP before you today. The Pronghorn OGDP is part of Bonanza Creek's Pronghorn CDP. A pre-application meeting was held back on August 11th of 2021 for the overall CDP. The 1041 WOGA hearing for the overall CDP was held on March 31st of 2022, and it was approved by the Weld County hearing officer. In Weld County's opinion, CDPs, and for the ECMC's CAPs, we believe that they are a good planning tool. From the county's perspective, we are able to gain further insight into future developments. We were able to consider the full development area when looking at cumulative impacts or infrastructure related items. They also create a public record for full phase development, which helps prevent future land use conflicts. Once the overall CDP, along with the siting of the specific locations, have been approved through Weld County, the operator then submits the site-specific 1041 WOGA information detailing elements specific to the individual locations. These are intentionally submitted closer to the time of construction to avoid for the possibility of multiple sundries as technology advances. Construction of an oil and gas location authorized by the CDP shall not commence until OJED staff has issued a determination that based off the site-specific information submitted, the proposed oil and gas location and site-specific BMPs are consistent with the information provided in the CDP application, and that is compliant with the requirements of the current Weld County Code. Site-specific conditions of approval, or COAs, may be included with the OJED determination when necessitated by changes in the code or the surrounding land uses. As long as the site-specific 1041 WOGA does not introduce any significant changes to a location, such as moving the location or expanding the surface disturbance of the individual location that was approved under the CDP, The site-specific details will be approved through the administrative process. At this time, the individual oil and gas locations under the Pronghorn OGDP have not been submitted to Weld County. The applicant has made us aware that they intend to submit the site-specific applications for all 4 locations within the CDP sometime in the future, possibly next week. For the record, Weld County has assigned the following case numbers to the individual locations. For the Pronghorn F16, we have 1041 Wogla 24-0021. For the Pronghorn P10 pad, we have 1041 Wogla 24-0022. For the Pronghorn P22 pad, we have 1041 Wogla 24-0023. And for the Pronghorn T4 pad, we have assigned case number 1041 Wogla 24-0024. 2A comments were submitted to the ECMC for all 4 locations making up the Pronghorn OGDP, and they are included in the director's recommendation. With that, OJED and Weld County does not have any concerns with the OGDP, and we do support approval of this permit.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the comments from Weld County, the relevant local government. Do any commissioners have questions? All right, we will let you, I believe you're probably going to be commenting on the next one as well. Is that right? And
Yeah,
we'll-
and I'll remain on the line for this case. If anyone has any questions, I can unmute and make my camera active if there are any.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. I appreciate the working relationship with Weld County on these matters. Ms. Jose, would you like to elevate your witnesses for the swearing in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If everyone could come on screen, please. Ms. Mercer, we will have 5 witnesses today too.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing 4.
Okay, yes, and we have also Santiago Rodriguez, who's on, and he may not be able to come on screen, but he is on, and maybe if he could unmute during the time, that would be great.
Okay,
Please
well, thank you
unmute.
very much. Good morning to the panelists. I will swear you in. We'll just go one at a time, and I'll ask that you raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. I'll begin with Mr. Roush.
My name is Caleb Roush, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Annable?
My name is Jeff Annable, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
My name is Stephen Miller, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Hubbard?
My name is Lila Hubbard, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. And Mr. Rodriguez, even though you're not on screen, we'll trust that you are raising your right hand.
My name is Santiago Rodriguez, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Jose, the panel is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, Chair, are you seeing that okay? Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Well, good morning, commissioners, staff, and members of the public. My name is Jamie Jose, and I, along with my partner, Kelsey Wieselinki from Jose Energy Law, represent Bonanza Creek Energy Operating Company, LLC, in this Pronghorn OGDP application that's before you today in docket number 2111-00228. Bonanza Creek Energy Operating Company is a wholly owned subsidiary of Civitas Resources, Inc. Bonanza would like to thank Weld County for its participation through the local permitting process and its approval of the Weld County Comprehensive Development Plan, which includes the 4 amended existing oil and gas locations subject to this OGDP, and would also like to thank ECMC staff and the director for their dedicated efforts to this OGDP. This application was filed early on after the adoption of the 2021 mission change rules, and is one of the first true horizontal infill well applications that was actually filed in the DJ Basin. The Bonanza team worked collaboratively with the ECMC staff on the evolution of this OGDP development plan, and on November 22nd, 2023, Bonanza submitted the amended OGDP application that's before you today. Bonanza is seeking approval of a 6,540 acre OGDP for the development and production of 26 new horizontal wells that will be developed from 4 amended existing oil and gas locations within the OGDP boundary. The OGDP development plan includes 6 new drilling and spacing units, 3 amended drilling and spacing units, and 2 new single well drilling and spacing units, formerly known as wellbore spacing units. In terms of the OGDP submittal, Bonanza complied with all notice requirements for the OGDP. No petitions were filed, and no public comments were submitted on the Form 2A or the hearing application. Bonanza does appreciate the question we received yesterday afternoon, and we will address that question in the presentation today. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Jeff Annabelle, Manager of Well and Location Permitting, and Ms. Lila Hubbard, Natural Resources Specialist, to present the OGDP application to the commission.
Thank you, Jamie, and good morning, commissioners. Thank you for taking the time to consider our Pronghorn OGDP. My name is Jeff Annabelle, Manager of Well Location Permitting for Civitas Resources. First, I would like to go over some general facts about the Pronghorn OGDP. It is a 6,540 acre OGDP that will be developed by 26 wells located within 7 DSUs and 2 WSUs, or single wellbore spacing units, sited on 4 existing pads. The relevant local government is Weld County, who has approved the siting of these locations through a WOGLA CDP. There are no residential building units, schools, or child care centers, high occupancy building units, designated outdoor activity areas, or disproportionately impacted communities within 1 mile of the proposed locations. When this application was filed, none of the locations were in an HPH, but 2 of the locations now fall within an HPH as a result of the 2023 ECMC HPH map updates. An ALA was not required for these locations, and we received no public comments during review. CDPHE did not request a consult since we are not proximate to any RBUs or DICs, and Bonanza voluntarily consulted with CPW multiple times between October 2023 and March of 2024 due to the implementation of new HPH polygons during the application process. I'd like to quickly address a commissioner question about 3 of our planned locations being situated on land designated CRP. All 3 locations are existing facilities that allow for additional development, and further, the surface owners whose lands are subject to the CRP is aware of the additional development on the existing oil and gas location and has no objections. Next slide. Here is an overview of the 26 new proposed wells composed of both 1 and 2 mile laterals that will produce from the Niobrara, Codell, and Carlisle formations. Civitas collaborated through multiple meetings with ECMC staff to develop the proposed mineral development plan that is protective of correlative rights. There are various unit setbacks and a 150-foot interwell setback within each of the DSUs and WSUs. Now, I would like to briefly cover each of the individual DSUs and WSUs. Before you is DSU number 1, a 640 acre unit that will contain 2 2-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn P22 pad. Next is DSU number 2, a 320 acre DSU that will contain approximately 320 acres and will be produced by 2 1-mile wells located on the Pronghorn P22 pad. Next is DSU number 3, an approximate 480 acre DSU that will contain 2 2-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn P22 pad. Next is our first WSU, an approximate 320 acre single well DSU that will contain 1 2-mile well sited on the Pronghorn P22 pad. Next is DSU number 4, which is an amended DSU that will contain approximately 640 acres that will be developed by 2 additional 2-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn T4 pad. Next is DSU number 5, an approximate 1,280 acre DSU that will contain 4 2-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn T4 pad. Next is DSU number 6, an approximate 1,280 acre DSU that will contain 4 2-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn P10 pad and 1 2-mile well sited on the Pronghorn T4 pad. Next is DSU number 7, an approximate 640 acre amended DSU that will contain 2 additional 1-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn F16 pad. Next is DSU number 8, an approximate 640 acre DSU that will contain 2 2-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn F16 pad. And the last DSU, which is DSU number 9, an amended 640 acre DSU that will contain an additional 3 1-mile wells sited on the Pronghorn F16 pad. And now our last WSU, which is WSU number 2, a 320 acre single well DSU well that will contain 1 2-mile well. Before you is an estimated operational timeline for the development of the 4 proposed locations within the Pronghorn OGDP. Our current schedule has planned the Pronghorn T4 and Pronghorn P10 pre-production operations outside of the HPH window, but these timelines are subject to change due to operational constraints. Next, I would like to reiterate that these locations are greater than 1 mile from RBUs, not immediately adjacent to any environmental features, and were sited outside of HPH at the time of application, and therefore do not meet any ALA requirements. Next, I would like to cover the relevant local government status. First, I would like to thank Weld County staff for their thorough review of our CDP application. Bonanza submitted our Pronghorn Wogla CDP 1041 Wogla 21-0017 permit on February 10th, 2022, and received approval on March 31st, 2022. During the Weld CDP process, Bonanza consulted with CDPHE and CPW. Next, I would like to cover Bonanza's proposed mitigations and mitigation investigations that were performed as a part of the Pronghorn OGDP preparation. Cumulative impact mitigation investigations that were performed for this OGDP include an electrification of pre-production and production operations, during which our evaluation of the Morgan County REA system determined there was insufficient system capacity to support electric drilling. Fortunately, we are proud to report that the system does allow for the upgrade to utility power for production operations. Additionally, Bonanza is happy to report that each of the proposed locations are and will continue to be connected to 3-phase takeaway that is connected to our Pronghorn CPF, which is also connected to oil, gas, and produced water pipelines. First, I would like to mention we will be minimizing cumulative impacts to surface disturbance by utilizing existing access roads and pads. Now, I'd like to go over some best management practices that will be implemented during the construction phase. These include additional avian surveys prior to construction to ensure there are no conflicts. Tracking controls will be installed and fresh water will be used on the access road to minimize dust. And the topsoil stockpiles will be stabilized with appropriate vegetation to provide both short and long-term stabilization. During drilling, we intend on utilizing a Tier 4 equivalent natural gas with battery backup powered rig or better, along with Group 2 drilling mud to mitigate odors, and a polyethylene liner as a spill prevention measure. Additionally, we will employ pipe cleaning procedures when removing the drill string from the hole, use a closed loop drilling system, and store drill cuttings in closed containers prior to being trucked off site to a commercial disposal site. During completion operations, Bonanza will utilize a temporary lay flat water line to source water, reducing cumulative impacts related to truck traffic. A Tier 4 equivalent or better completion fleet will be used to reduce emissions. Sealed sandbox containers will be used for transportation and storage of sand, and flowback will be routed through emission-controlled production facilities. Additionally, Bonanza employs the company standard best management practices listed. During production operations, Bonanza will utilize the existing three-phase takeaway to transport oil, gas, and produced water off location and to market. We will upgrade the existing facility with a pressurized maintenance vessel, compressed air pneumatics, and utility power. Additionally, we also have remote shut-in capabilities and equipment that blends with the surrounding landscape. Now, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Lila Hubbard, our Natural Resource Specialist.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Lila Hubbard, and I'm the Natural Resource Specialist at Civitas. I'm going to run through a few details about high priority habitat and our consultation with CPW. None of the 4 locations were in high priority habitat during initial project planning and assessment, nor at the time of submittal. When the OGDP was resubmitted after completeness comments, 2 of the locations, Pronghorn P10 and Pronghorn T4, were in proposed mule deer winter concentration and mule deer severe winter range HPH areas for the 2023 HPH layers. All 4 locations remain outside any current HPH at that time. Although this project was submitted prior to any active overlapping HPH, Bonanza reached out to CPW in October 2023 regarding the proposed mule deer HPH areas. On February 20th, 2024, CPW and Civitas staff met on site at the P10 and T4 locations to discuss the proposed project, HPH, and possible voluntary BMPs. The primary BMP discussed and preferred by CPW was to avoid the mule deer winter season during development operations. In case seasonal avoidance would not be possible, we also discussed alternative BMP options. CPW and Bonanza agreed that if the season could not be avoided at the P10 pad, sound walls would be installed along the eastern side of the pad toward the center of HPH. The northern side of the pad also faces the center of HPH. However, per discussion with CPW, no sound wall would be necessary on that side, since the topography provides natural sound mitigation and there is existing disturbance north of the pad. Similarly, we also discussed that if the season cannot be avoided at the T4 pad, sound walls would be installed along the northern and eastern sides of the pad toward the center of HPH. Lastly, if the only phase that had to overlap the winter season would be construction, we discussed that limiting daily construction hours to 2 hours after sunrise to 2 hours before sunset would be an alternative BMP option, since this would mean we were avoiding disturbance during the coldest and most sensitive periods of the day for wintering big game. After our thorough review with CPW and internally, we are proud to say that based on our current schedule, which was shown earlier in this presentation, we plan to avoid construction, drilling, and completion operations during the mule deer winter season at both locations in HPH, which aligns with the most preferred BMP option discussed. We would like to thank Brandon, Lexi, and their team at CPW for their time reviewing this project and discussing BMPs with us. As always, we appreciate their time and valuable input. I will now hand it back over to Mr. Annable. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila. And I'd like to thank the director and ECMC staff for their thorough evaluation and collaboration during the processing of the Pronghorn OGDP, which culminated in the director's recommendation of approval that was issued on May 8th. Finally, I would like to request that the commission approve the approximate 6,540 acre Pronghorn OGDP, allowing for 26 new horizontal wells to be developed from our 4 expanded oil and gas locations: the Pronghorn P22, the Pronghorn T4, Pronghorn P10, and the Pronghorn F16, all of which are sited within the OGDP boundary. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. We are available if you have any questions regarding our proposed development.
All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Jost, anything further?
Nothing further other than just asking everyone on the subject matter expert panel to come on video, and we are available for questions. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, the panel is available for questions. Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for working their way through what I think it's maybe the most complicated DSU setup I've seen since I've been a commissioner. So it's impressive, and I appreciate you all working together. I think my remaining question about this one is it still seems interesting to me that we haven't really settled on what kind of drill rig and completion rig we're using, but you're contemplating drilling this year. So you're saying tier 4 or equivalent. Do you really not know what kind of engine you're using yet? What kind of setup?
Thank you, Commissioner McGowan. I know for sure, I mean, we're still trying to figure out when our tier 4 rig is going to be delivered. There's been delays. So we're not sure 100% when we're going to get that, but we, at a bare minimum, will drill with natural gas battery backup, which is the tier 4 equivalent drilling rig. And then our completion fleets are various types. One is a natural gas battery setup, and our other completion crew is a natural gas battery with a couple tier 4 engines as well, diesel engines in that one. So it's going to be one of those two fleets, both to be considered tier 4 equivalent.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you. You mentioned that 3 of the 4 locations are in CRP, and appreciate you addressing that question. Just a bit of a follow-up on that. You mentioned that they are existing oil and gas sites and that the landowner is aware and supportive of additional development. Do you have any more information on any Department of Agriculture actions that'll be necessary to green light further development or to remove those parcels from CRP?
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. Not at this time. We're not aware of any additional requirements, but we will be sure to work with Department of Agriculture to make sure we take the appropriate next steps.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission to the panel? Seeing no further questions, we move to the deliberation phase. Does anybody desire to initiate deliberations? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just make one comment. Appreciate this application and think it was good work. And I agree with Commissioner McGowan that worked through some complex issues here. I specifically wanted to thank the operator for their additional work on the wildlife issues here. As was pointed out, this was a largely voluntary consultation with CPW associated with the new polygons. They are subject to the HPH maps that were in place at the time of application, but I note that they proactively reached out to CPW and not just with empty words, but are implementing several BMPs, including timing limitations, partial sound walls in order to protect mule deer habitat within the new polygons. So I wanted to specifically note that and thank the operator for their work on that issue.
Other commissioners with deliberative thoughts? Does anybody desire to make a motion? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the application. Further deliberation? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Jost. Thank you to our staff for the good work on this application as well. We now will take 5 minutes, return at 9:55, and we will take up the next and last matter on our agenda. All right, welcome back. This is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. It is May 15th. This is our business agenda. We are now taking up docket number 231200360, an oil and gas development plan. The applicant is Bison for Operating LLC. It is entitled the Sandy Bay OGDP. I believe we were looking to hear from Ms. Teeters from Weld County to initiate this matter.
Good morning.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you. Well, I will go ahead and kick this off. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak for a few minutes regarding the Weld County 1041 WOGLA process regarding the Bison 4 Operating LLC Sandy Bay OGDP. Weld County's Oil and Gas Energy Department held a pre-application meeting for the Barracuda Pad and the Triggerfish Pad locations, which together make up the Sandy Bay OGDP, and that meeting was held on May 31st of 2023. At the pre-application meeting, several alternative sites were discussed. Attendees included Weld County staff, Bison 4 and their staff, ECMC staff, CPW, and BLM. CDPHE was invited but did not attend, and they were given, as well as all other attendees, a copy of the meeting minutes. Case number 1041 WOGLA 23-0049 was assigned to the Barracuda Pad, and case number 1041 WOGLA 23-0050 was assigned to the Triggerfish Pad. The two 1041 WOGLA applications were received on December 1st of 2023. Referral agencies were sent out, referral requests were sent out to multiple agencies back on December 22nd of 2023. Responses were received from Weld County Environmental Health, Weld County Department of Planning Services, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, ECMC, CDPHE, OEM, and Briggsdale Fire Protection District. Responses were not received from Briggsdale RE10 School District, as well as Eaton RE2 School District and BLM. There were no Weld County defined building units within the 1041 WOGLA zone for either of the two locations. Weld County sent notice of our hearing to 4 individual property owners for the Barracuda and 6 individually property owners for the Triggerfish. While Weld County did not receive any applications for intervention for either the Barracuda or the Triggerfish location, there was a notice party who met with OJED staff to gather information related to the development. The questions were in relations to setbacks for future development, lighting, and the minerals being developed. Overall, the notice party, which I can state his name if required, but he was in support of the development, just had general questions. The Triggerfish application included an analysis of one alternative site, which was reviewed and discussed in detail with OJED staff, and the Barracuda application included an analysis of 2 alternative sites, which was also reviewed and discussed in detail with OJED staff. At the 1041 WOGLA hearing, the Weld County hearing officer also reviewed and discussed the alternative sites with the applicant, and the Triggerfish and Barracuda locations were determined to be the best locations. The 1041 WOGLA hearing was held on February 22nd of 2024. The hearing officer considered testimony at the hearing, found the applications compliant with Weld County code requirements, and approved both permits. No referral parties participated in the 1041 WOGLA hearing. The final orders were recorded with Weld County Clerk and Recorder on February 28th of 2024, and the reception number for the Barracuda Pad is 494-6585, and the reception number for the Triggerfish Pad is 494-6584. And they were subsequently published in the Greeley Tribune on March 1st of 2024. And that creates a vested property right for the permits. From a land use perspective, both of these are in a good location, which is closer to the other oil and gas development, intermixed with agricultural grounds. 2A comments for both locations were submitted to the ECMC and are included in the director's recommendation. Weld County agrees with the director's recommendation and supports approval. I will remain on the Zoom call for the duration of this docket if there are any questions that any of the commissioners or the applicants may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking around, I don't see any questions at this point. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank
With
you.
that, Ms. Weslinki, if you want to elevate your witnesses, we'll initiate the swearing in of witnesses.
Thank you, Chair. We have 3 witnesses from Bison, and they are all on.
Good morning to the panelists. I'll go one by one and ask you each to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. I will begin with Ms. Gillen.
My name is Katie Gillen, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
My name is Ian Hogan, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer.
My name is Bennett Meyer, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you very much.
All right, the video panel is yours.
Thank you, Chair. We'll get our PowerPoint up and then I will begin. Perfect. Thank you. Well, good morning again, Commissioners. My name is Kelsey Wazelinski with Jost Energy Law. And with Jamie Jost, we represent Bison 4 Operating LLC in the Sandy Bay OGDP before you today in docket 2312-00360. We would like to thank Weld County for its support and participation in the WOGLA process for the Sandy Bay OGDP, and also ECMC staff, CPW, and the director for their efforts on this OGDP. We also appreciate the 2 questions we received from the commissioners yesterday, and we will address these in the presentation. Next slide. This OGDP requests that the commission establish an approximate 4,196 acre OGDP for the development of 23 new horizontal wells in the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, and Carlisle formations. The OGDP requests that the commission approve 2 new Form 2As for the new Triggerfish pad for the development of 8 new horizontal wells, and the new Barracuda pad for the development of 15 new horizontal wells. In addition, the Sandy Bay OGDP contains 3 drilling and spacing unit applications. The Whitetail DSU is an amendment to an existing 1280 acre DSU for sections 4 and 9 to add the Fort Hays and Carlisle formations and to reduce subsurface setbacks for the development of 7 horizontal wells. The Barracuda DSU is a new 1280 acre DSU for sections 31 and 32 for 8 horizontal wells, and the Triggerfish DSU is a new 1600 acre DSU for sections 25, 30, and the west half of 29 for 8 horizontal wells. As stated by Ms. Teeters, the 2 proposed locations are located in Weld County, and the 1041 WOGLA permits were approved in February of 2024. The 2 proposed locations do not trigger any Rule 304 ALA criteria. As Bison will describe in the presentation today, during initial consultation with CPW, Bison agreed to move the proposed Sandy Bay pad to avoid fragmentation of the 2022 mapped winter pronghorn concentration area, and the current proposed locations are not within 2023 or 2024 HPH. As part of the Sandy Bay OGDP, Bison is committed to several BMPs to avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential adverse impacts, which Bison will describe today. To highlight a few, Bison commits to Tier 2 dual fuel engines for drilling and Tier 4 engines for completion, and has committed to oil, gas, and produced water takeaway. And finally, Bison has complied with all notice requirements for the Sandy Bay OGDP. No formal petitions were filed, and no public comments were received on the Form 2As. And with that, I will turn it over to Katie Gillen to continue the presentation.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and we thank you for your time and attention to our application. I would like to start by introducing myself. I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs at EHS at Bison. I'm here to provide an overview of the Sandy Bay OGDP and answer any questions to the best of my ability. Also sworn in and also introduced are Ian Hogan, the Vice President of Exploration and Geology, and Bennett Meyer, Land Manager at Bison. Next. Bison Oil and Gas has been before the commission previously, so I will just add a quick reminder here that Bison operates in the DJ Basin in Colorado and Wyoming and is a local Colorado operator. Bison 4 is now about the 6th largest producer by BOE in the state. We take pride in our Colorado origins and are committed to developing oil and gas in a responsible manner and contributing jobs and growth to the local economy. Our presence in Colorado is a point of pride, and we are committed to being a leader in the industry in both operational excellence and environmental stewardship. Next slide. Sandy Bay OGDP comprises 3 DSUs and will be developed from 2 proposed new oil and gas locations. the Barracuda pad located in section 33 of 7 North 62 West, and the Triggerfish pad located in section 29 of 7 North 62 West. Both locations are on fee surface in remote areas zoned agricultural in unincorporated Wells County. The locations will share an access road to consolidate operations and reduce surface disturbance. There are no applicable ALA criteria to either location. Both locations and the access road are outside of high priority habitat for the 2023 and 2024 mapped areas. The Barracuda pad will develop 2 DSUs with a total of 15 2-mile lateral wells. The disturbed area during construction phase will be 20 acres. The location after interim reclamation will be 10.2 acres. The access road will be 1.3 miles. Triggerfish pad will develop 1 DSU and 8 2-mile lateral wells. The disturbed area during construction will be 16 acres, and the location after interim reclamation will be 6.5 acres. It will share the same access road with Barracuda. Next slide. Oh, there we go. A summary of the permitting timeline. The 1041 WOGLA pre-application meeting for both locations was held May 31st, 2023. CPW and ECMC were present and expressed no opposition to the proposed location. The WOGLAs for both locations were approved on February 22nd, and no public comment was received. Bison obtained director recommendation on April 16th, and there was no public comment received on the application. Bison received the commissioner questions regarding the BLM permitting process as it applies to this OGDP. The only federal mineral development included in the OGDP application will consist of federal minerals that will be developed from 5 fed fee wells in section 4 and 9 from the north to the south. The surface location is on private fee surface, and the location will develop both fee and federal minerals. Bison applied for the Fed APDs on March 11th. The permitting process includes under phase 1, verification of a valid lease, then the application moves to phase 2 for technical review. Bison's APDs have passed technical review and will soon be posted for a 30-day public comment period. Once BLM completes its public comment review period, they will issue a decision for approval, denial, or deferral of the APDs. Next slide. We included a map depicting cultural features under Rule 304B2B to highlight the remote nature of the location and minimal impacts of environmental features at our Triggerfish pad. To highlight here, there are no residential building units, high occupancy building units, schools, or disproportionately impacted communities, all of which are well over 1 mile away from the location. The nearest mapped high priority habitat is over 1 mile away. Bison carefully selected this location to avoid impacts, and as such, no ALA criteria applies. The Triggerfish location also provides ideal access to the underlying minerals as well as existing pipeline infrastructure and close access to Weld County Road 74. Next slide. Similarly, for the Barracuda pad, we have provided here the map that shows the remote nature and minimal impacts to environmental features. Additionally, I'll highlight here, there are no residential building units, high occupancy building units, school or disproportionately impacted communities, all of which are over a mile away from the location. Similarly, the nearest mapped high priority habitat is also a mile away. The Barracuda location also provides ideal access to underlying minerals and is in close proximity to existing infrastructure. But an overview. Bison has considered key cultural and environmental features to avoid and mitigate impacts when selecting the Barracuda and Triggerfish surface location and access road. Pad is not located within a floodplain and is not within 2022 or 2020, not within 2023 or 2024 high priority habitat, and there are no nearby sensitive water receptors. Bison believes these are exceptional locations based on the 4 other possible locations evaluated during the WOGLA application process. Next slide. The proposed access point for ingress to the well pad is from Highway 392 North to Weld County Road 74, which is the nearest connector road. Travel distribution is expected to be 100% of traffic coming from the west on Highway 392. Bison's siting rationale includes avoiding local towns, school facilities, future school facilities, and child care centers. Bison has also implemented the following traffic reduction measures. Both locations will be connected to oil, gas, and produce water pipeline takeaway, which significantly reduces traffic associated with hauling. The location is also equipped with automation to allow for 24-hour remote monitoring. The monitoring also helps reduce daily traffic to the location because Bison personnel can turn on wells and equipment, measure tank levels, verify pressures and temperatures all remotely. Next slide. While no alternative location siting analysis is required, as no Rule 304 B2B criteria apply, the locations in the Sandy Bay OGDP, Bison did evaluate 4 alternative locations suggested by Weld County and ECMC staff during the application meeting for the Weld County 1041 WOGLA permitting process. The 4 alternative locations shown here offered no significant reduction in impacts, and in some cases were more adversely cited in comparison to the 2 locations selected. 2 of the alternative locations highlighted here, Crow Valley and Whitetail, are owned and operated by Bison. However, they are technically infeasible to expand due to existing infrastructure that has boxed in the surface and preventing the safe expansion of the pad and installation of the equipment. Next slide. In summary, the Triggerfish location is protective as it avoids all ECMC cultural features and has no significant downsides to the location were identified. Slide. Similarly, the Barracuda also avoids all ECMC cultural features and no significant downsides were identified. I also want to highlight here that with the development of the Barracuda pad, the location to the east, Crow Valley pad, will be plugged and reclaimed once the new wells have been drilled. Additionally, this will reduce surface equipment and, the Whitetail pad to the south, shown here in the picture in the bottom right, will also be partially reclaimed, and the wells will be rerouted to the Barracuda site. This will reduce surface impacts as well as reduce emissions. Next slide. Pending permit approval, Bison is planning on the following development timeline for both the Barracuda and the Triggerfish locations. Bison plans to fully develop the DSUs at each pad in a single occupation. Next slide. Bison has included best-in-class BMPs to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts during drilling and completions. This includes our drilling rig will be powered by CNG dual fuel engines. This reduces usage, thereby also reducing emissions. Also, Bison will use Tier 4 engines for completions during operations, along with all of the other best management practices listed here. Next slide. During the production phase, the BMPs Bison will implement to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts include the installation of oil, gas, and produced water pipelines, which significantly reduces truck traffic from Holland, as well as on-site storage. In addition, pneumatic controllers will be operated by instrument air, eliminating those emissions. Bison also utilizes a modern flowback design, where flowback is turned directly to the production facility, thereby reducing on-site storage and truck traffic from hauling during the flowback phase. Bison also received a commissioner question regarding why Bison has requested 6 oil tanks and 4 produced water tanks at the Barracuda pad, given we have pipeline takeaway for oil and produced water. These storage tanks are utilized for maintenance purposes, as well as for meeting required pipeline specifications. In addition, some of the tanks requested are planned for the relocation of the existing Whitetail F4 pad just south of the Barracuda to the Barracuda production facility. The Whitetail F4 are also have federal minerals that are mandated, that have mandated measurement requirements, and no commingling of production from the leases is currently allowed. Next slide. While both proposed locations in the access road are outside of 2023 and 2024 high priority habitat, at the time Bison commenced initial planning, the locations and access road were within the 2022 pronghorn mapped high priority habitat. Bison consulted with CPW and as a result, voluntarily agreed to move the Triggerfish location to reduce potential fragmentation. CPW had no concerns with the cited Barracuda pad. Bison agreed to conduct migratory bird surveys prior to construction, should construction occur during the nesting season. Additional wildlife BMPs will include a quiet frac fleet and no fencing around the production facilities to prevent migration paths. Next slide. In conclusion, there was no opposing public comment received on the OGDP. We have local siting approved by Wells County. And to highlight here, the director's recommendation and staff comments. Impacts to public health, safety, and welfare will largely be avoided, minimized, and mitigated by the successful implementation of Bison site-specific BMPs included in the application. Next slide. Spacing overview. The OGDP contains 3 drilling and spacing unit applications. The first application for the Whitetail unit is an amendment of an existing 1,280 acre DSU to reduce setbacks and add formations. The second and third applications seek to establish a new 1,280 acre Barracuda DSU and a new 1,600 acre triggerfish DSU for this development. These applications are supported by land, regulatory, geology, and engineering testimony. Next slide. The slide presented here shows Bison's requested relief. This concludes our presentation, and we are now available to answer any questions the commissioners may.
Great. Thank you very much. Anything further, Ms. Wesselinki?
None from me, thank you. I think we can take our hearing presentation down and we are open for questions.
Commissioners, the panel is open for questions. Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this information. I'm wondering if we could dig a little more into the number of oil and produced water tanks that you have proposed at each of the locations. With other operators, when I see all liquids being piped, the setup is more like tank light, and there's maybe one of each tank in case there's an upset or the midstream operator has an issue and they want assurance of some sort of backup system, right? And so for the one location, I think I'm not understanding why we need this many tanks. It seems like you could maybe work on minimizing the impact, the size of the pad for both locations. So I think I would appreciate just a little more discussion for each of those pads and why you need that number of tanks.
Certainly. So Bison's crude oil is thicker than the DJ core basin. Our crude ranges from 36 to 38 API gravity versus DJ core gravity, which is closer to 50 API. So Bison's crude requires heat, chemical, and residence time to break the crude out from the water in order to meet our pipeline specifications. So the tanks allow Bison to provide adequate residence time for the crude to separate from the water. We also utilize a recycle pump to remove the excess water that separates from the crude in the settling tanks. So for that reason, Bison needs these storage tanks. It's that residence.
Oh, okay, so
And then I should also add the Whitetail F4 pad that's located just to the south. Bison has proposed to relocate those wells' production to the Barracuda pad, and those wells have federal minerals, and the production can't be commingled in those same production tanks on the Barracuda site. So they have to have, per BLM's measurement and production requirements, their own tanks.
okay. So I'm going to apologize. 10 steps forward and 15 steps back. I've been a commissioner for a while now. I should understand this. Do you not have separators proposed for each of these locations? And so are you saying that the separators cannot adequately separate out the crude from the water, and you need additional storage time in the tanks to continue to separate out in order for the product to be sent to midstream?
I would say that the separators don't adequately do their job because they are doing their job. You might be thinking of like a high vapory tankless production facility where oil pipeline specifications allow for less residence time in the tanks.
I'll stop because I'm over my skis, but I'm not I feel like the whole purpose of the separator is to separate all your liquids so that you can send them to their midstream, their appropriate places. And so I'm still just trying to understand why you need this amount of tanks, and I'm assuming it's for additional separation, but maybe
Yeah.
I'm understanding.
I guess I could clarify there. So the oil tanks also store liquids that are rejected from the LACT unit, which is where, oil is sold, measured and sold. If it's not meeting pipeline specifications, it is rerouted back to those tanks for additional residence time to meet, BS&W specifications, temperature specifications. So yeah, I think that's, the separators are doing their job. But in some cases, more residence time to let that BS&W settle out is necessary.
Okay, thanks I appreciate you doing a little dive here for me. I'm wondering if you could also talk to me a little bit about, I know that you all said that you explored, I think, electric drill rigs, but there's not a provider available. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about exploring electrifying the pad, the production pad itself on a permanent basis to reduce your long-term emissions and where that conversation is at.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bison aims to electrify our production facilities whenever we can. We did engage with the power provider in the area very early in the planning process. Excel is a power provider in the area. And they are not able to provide a commitment even to have power available before 2027 to 2028. But, in the long term, it is Bison's intention to have power at our locations. Just with no certainty from the power provider, we can't.
Well, I imagine as we're working on trying to achieve our intensity targets for various pollutants that you all will use that and consider that as a tool moving forward. And even if it takes a couple of years to get to it. So thanks for exploring it.
Other questions from commissioners to the panel? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize for belaboring the point, but I'm gonna belabor it just a little bit because I'm struggling to understand also on the number of tanks. Could you kind of hypothetically walk us through the ramifications of having fewer tanks on site? Let's just arbitrarily say if you had half the number of tanks on site, can you walk us through what that does to your operations?
We could have insufficient storage space for that LACT reject, and the location would potentially shut in because you're not able to meet pipeline specifications.
Thank you. And one follow-up then, and so what was the number of tanks based on then? Is there an estimated production that the estimated number of tanks are based on? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, the estimated number of tanks is based on the total production of the wells, which, Bison intends to develop all 15 wells in a single occupation. So all wells will, come online, in fair short order. So the tanks are sized and, the number is provided on the volume of production that we anticipate having from each well, and our estimated residence time.
Thank you. And then my final follow-up, I'm assuming that's production based on the initial heavy production at the sites. Is the decline in production taken into account over time? And if so, how is that taken into account, and what's the plan as production declines?
I think long term, the production or the tank count would change because production obviously declines over time. So these tanks may be required in the short term upfront. Should production decline sufficiently over time that would allow us to meet our residence time, we could potentially reduce our tank count. And I also still wanted to highlight that F2, the whitetail location proposed below, the tanks that are needed for that are included in that count. So should we be unable to relocate that whitetail, the wells to the Barracuda, we would not need some of those additional tanks.
And I'd like to also add, not just those 2 wells that we would plan on relocating, but the entire 5 of the wells on the whitetail DSU that goes south are fed. The Barracuda wells, 8 wells going to the west are fee, so those cannot be commingled.
Thank you for the additional discussion. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Nothing further.
Other questions for the panel? Seeing none, we move to the deliberation phase. Does anyone desire to deliberate? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I reviewed the application and listened to the presentation, my take on this application is that there's good things to be said about the siting of the location, the distance between sensitive receptors, the what turns out to be outside of high priority habitat after updating in maps. And so I appreciate the considerations around siting. I do think that the application meets the rules and is approvable. I do note that the operator has indicated that they intend to meet their NOx intensity requirements. I think some of the technology that's being proposed here is going to be challenging for that long term. And I think some of the technology being proposed potentially negatively impacts other operators in the sense of overall NOx intensity targets that industry will be required to upkeep. And so from my opinion, this isn't the best effort I've seen in a non-attainment area application as far as the technology being proposed and the number of tanks being contemplated. But I do think that it meets the rules and is approvable. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for the deliberative thoughts. Others with deliberative thoughts? Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the application.
Second. Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The OGDP development plan on docket 231200360 is approved. Thank you to the applicant and to our staff for the good work getting it to this juncture.
Thank you.
Commissioners, with that, we have continued or finalized our work for the day. I would move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. I would remind everybody that we have a 511 hearing tomorrow evening on the Lowry Comprehensive Area Plan. And so we look forward to seeing folks at that meeting tomorrow evening. With that, all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll see folks that are going to be with us tomorrow evening. Thank you.